So I guess a good place to start might be if you can just give me a little bit of background as to how you became involved in Elon's efforts to promote civic engagement. I know there's a couple different work groups here on campus, and could you just explain kind of your involvement in those as well?
Okay, so this summer I took over as the coordinator for the National Campaign for Civic Engagement, which is a consortium of a bunch of different universities that Harvard hosts, and there are something like 20 universities involved. And so I took over as the Elon coordinator. And with that came a seat at the Civic Engagement Council, and I started participating in the Political Engagement Working Group. Before that, I dealt with civic engagement because I teach Intro to American Government, so it's part and parcel of what I do every day here at Elon.
Gotcha. And why is civic engagement an important topic to address and cover and try and get the students engaged with?
Well, I think it's a critical time in your life, right? We're setting sort of new standards, and being involved in politics is important. People have fought long and hard to have the right to vote, and I hate to see students waste that by not standing up and being heard, particularly since young people tend to participate at lower rates. We really want to encourage students to get active in the political process now and have their voices be heard.
And not that this is an election year to make any sort of predictions either way. I could
Right.
see either a very low turnout or a very high turnout. But either way, both candidates have very high unfavorables. How do you see that affecting levels of engagement?
I think it's probably a wash. Some people are turned off by the process because of those high unfavorable ratings, and some people may be more invigorated because they really dislike one candidate or the other. So my guess is maybe it sort of washes itself out.
Mm-hmm. And as far as Elon's efforts to promote civic engagement, you said that, could you just give me the name of the group again that you're
It's
coordinating?
the National Campaign for Civic Engagement.
And what does that responsibility entail with regard to being the Elon coordinator for that?
So again, it's run out of Harvard, and so part of it is we send 2 students to a conference every year, and they go and brainstorm different sort of civic engagement ideas. So certainly voting is an important form of civic engagement, but there are lots of other ways you can participate in your local community. So 2 students go each year, and it's been postponed this year till the spring. It's a busy season, but they'll go and sort of brainstorm and be with other students who are sort of thinking along those lines.
And is that held at different sites, or is that in D.C.?
It's always held at the Institute of Politics at Harvard University.
You've said that twice already.
It's okay.
And then I guess with regard to voting, that's one of the main ways people can engage in the process. What are some other recommendations that you would have? I know there's going to be presidential debate watch parties coming up. You talked about bingo. What are some other ways that people can become involved without having to worry about voting for someone they might or might not like?
Well, so for students here on campus, yes, we have debate watch parties scheduled for all 3 of the major presidential debates. We're going to have debate bingo, which is an easy way, so you don't have to come with a lot of knowledge, but it'll keep you involved in what the candidates are saying. There's that. There are lots of other events being held on campus that the Council for Civic Engagement has flagged as having some level of importance, and they don't just have to do with this election or voting, right? So we've had a panel with Syrian refugees, even our common reading speaker. That's a civic engagement, right? He's talking about injustice in our legal system. So we've flagged a lot of opportunities on campus to participate in this particular election, or just to sort of be more civic minded as a whole.
And one of the main messages I've constantly heard from different administrators, whenever I'm interviewing them, they say, we're trying to train people to be global citizens. We're trying to teach them to be civically engaged.
Right.
What do those phrases mean to you?
Well, so for me, I think of it in terms of American politics because that's what I teach. But yes, we want you to be engaged as a global citizen, absolutely. But even as it comes to American politics, right, you want to be informed about the world at large. How will this election, how will 2016 impact America's standing in the world? How do things like the Syrian refugee crisis play into this election, and thinking about how we're all interconnected? So I think a lot of what a liberal arts education does is try to teach you to think broadly and not sort of silo off different pieces of information, but learn how to bring them together. And so I think that civic engagement and being globally minded is about bringing these ideas together.
And one of the concerns that I've heard just from talking with some different students, we saw David Gergen deliver the commencement address, and some people criticized him for using it as a forum to speak about HB2 rather than some of the graduating class. And then we see Kathleen Parker, she's invited here, and it's good to go. And then there's a petition filed. Can you just speak to the importance of being open to diverse perspectives? Because it seems that we're seeing a lot of polarization where people are kind of closing themselves off.
Absolutely. I mean, I encourage all students to seek out views on both sides of the aisle, right? The last thing that we want you to do is come and just only hear people who say what you want them to say, right? It's important to go and be challenged and try to keep an open mind. That's not to say that you go and someone's trying to change your opinion, but I think it's so important to be presented with all sides of an issue or just see things through a different lens. Again, it doesn't mean you have to agree with them, but hearing those arguments and being open-minded about it, again, is a cornerstone of a liberal arts education. So I guess I can see frustration, but at the same time, we have to be open and accepting of all views. Doesn't mean we have to agree with them, but we have to listen to them in a respectful manner.
And what responsibilities do you see either the political science department or the university as a whole playing as a facilitator of this kind of dialogue?
Yes, I think the political science department wants to sort of set an example for how you can have healthy, open, respectful political discourse, right? We sometimes lose sight of the fact that we can talk about these things in a respectful manner, and I think all the professors in our department really want to sort of set an example of how to do this in a open and, again, I keep coming back to that word of respect, but respectful manner.
And I think one of the more interesting things for me this semester has been kind of that very first day in your class. You were very candid in saying, I want to hear what your thoughts are, but I also want you to be open to listening.
Yeah.
It seems that in past courses I've taken, especially in high school, there was a participation requirement where you just have to talk, but it seems, at least within the political science department, at least an equal emphasis seems to be placed on listening as well. Is that kind of what you've experienced and what's your teaching approach?
Absolutely. On all of my syllabi, it says, that participation and discussion is important and you're welcome to share your own views, but you should simply share those, not with the intention of trying to change someone else's mind. You should be open to hearing other views, but you're not coming in there to sort of try to win someone over. I don't want anyone to think of class participation that way. Your idea is just to express your views and to be open to hearing opposing views. Sometimes it's nice to force students to try to articulate the other side too, to make you uncomfortable and try to think of it from a different angle, and that can be really helpful to help you see the other side of the argument as well.
And what year did you start at Elon?
2013.
2013, okay. And I know a lot's been happening recently. Elon Vote started in 2014, for example. And maybe it's not a good question to ask for the historical time period, but since you've been here, how have you seen the progression of at least getting more students aware of voting?
Well, I'm so encouraged by what I'm seeing on campus this year in particular. We have built some really good structures with Elon Votes. We use this Turbo Vote program that allows our students who are from all over the United States access to their absentee ballots, which is really important. A large percentage of our students are not from North Carolina, and so we have a really good structure in place. We have a lot of student involvement. The students who are in charge of Elon Votes are constantly getting requests for more, that other people want to participate, which is so encouraging. But we've built a lot of structures in place early. We sort of got on top of it for 2016 and already scheduled and planned and booked rooms and got students involved really early in that process, which I think is great. We didn't come back to fall semester and all of a sudden have to start planning. We built this in advance and in preparation, and I think that'll only continue to expand going forward. Each election year now we sort of have this scaffolding in place to build on.
And you mentioned Turbo Vote, but what are some of the other structures that have become in place this year?
So we have this political engagement working group, which brings together the national campaign, Elon Votes, the Center for Leadership is participating. We have a lot of different sort of groups that we're bringing together to be efficient in our use of our time, right? Elon students are so busy. We don't want to all overwhelm them from different angles. We're trying to sort of present a united front, have a one-stop shop, but let a lot of different voices be a part of that. So it's been a really great group, and I'm really pleased with how it's developed.
And what's kind of the main mission of that political engagement working group this year?
So it's to get students the information so that they can make informed decisions, so that they can be registered to vote, to get those ballots. It's a completely nonpartisan mission, right? We're not trying to in any way tell them how to vote. It's to provide them the ability to go vote and make those decisions for themselves and the access, right? So students who register to vote here locally, there's going to be buses running all day on election day to get them to the 2 separate polling sites that Elon students might use. So it's all about presenting information and access.
And I think you hit on a good point with using the word a united front. We're trying, because there's a lot of different opportunities on campus, and that can be overwhelming, especially to incoming students. Being that Elon's just such a heavy, involved campus for students, what are some of the issues with trying to reach out to people who are already doing a lot and maybe don't have enough to do more on their plate?
Well, I mean, it's certainly always hard on this campus to sort of break through, but I think we've done a really nice job in advance assigning different groups or focusing on different areas, right? So the Center for Leadership is partnering with us on the first debate. SGA is partnering with us for the second debate. So to bring in different sort of groups and assign them, this is your sort of time, this is your area, but they're all involved in sort of the overarching process. But yeah, it is really hard to sort of break through in a sea of many alternatives. But like I said, we flagged the calendar. We have an Elon Votes calendar, which is helpful that these are the events that we think we want to bring to your attention.
And you mentioned like the Center for Leadership and SGA. What's the process for getting other organizations to co-sponsor something or to help promote your event? What's that process entail?
So certainly anyone could approach the Political Engagement Working Group and contact us, and we would be happy to try to find ways to get them engaged and involved. Probably the easiest way is to go through Elon Votes. They're always happy for more volunteers and to partner together, but we would welcome anybody who wants to reach out, and as long as they sort of agree with our same mission of providing information and access and informing students, then we would be happy to have any help we can get.
And my final just couple of questions are on kind of the voting process itself for a student perspective. And I'm from California. I'm new to North Carolina. I'm not registered to vote yet. And I would like to vote in North Carolina. What's the process entail? And I know it's 100 different rules for 50 different states.
Right.
But generally for all students, what's it look like?
So you can go again to elon.edu/vote and it will take you to Turbo Vote, which can walk you through the entire process. Any student who wants to move their registration from another state to North Carolina should do so after careful consideration. It can have some impacts because you are moving your residency legally from one state to another.
And what are some of those considerations?
So if you had a scholarship, it could have an impact there. You could have to move the title of your car and get a new car tag for North Carolina, which can be expensive. So there can be some ramifications for your family. So I've heard of students who tried to move their registration and then there was a problem for a scholarship, say, and it could end up costing their family some money. So you should thoughtfully consider that before you do it. Don't just think, yay, North Carolina's a swing state, I'll register to vote there. If you want to, though, you just need to get registered to vote. There are different deadlines for each state, which is frustrating. We can't just provide you a blanket. You have to be registered by X, Y, and Z. So you need to find the date. The earlier, the better. And then if you're registering to vote out of state, so if you were to register in California, you could use Turbo Vote to get an absentee ballot mailed to you. It would come in the mail, you would simply fill it out. You can do that whenever you're ready. You could wait till after the debates, you could do it before. In some states, early voting begins right now. And you could, if you were home over fall break, you might be able to vote using your early voting. But you could use Turbo Vote to look that up and find your polling place and then vote while you're there. There are any sort of number of different ways you can vote.
And while we do have a significant portion of out-of-state students, I think it's like 83 or somewhere in that 80 to 85% out-of-state, still the most populous group coming to Elon is still North Carolina residents. Not much, but still. Can you just speak to some of the trends you've seen recently with the Fourth Circuit Court's decision with voter ID laws and maybe how North Carolina specifically compares to those of other states as far as access?
So at this point, you have to be registered. It seems like voter ID has been overturned and you don't have to worry about that. North Carolina has certainly tried to make it more difficult to vote, but it seems like at this moment you will not need to provide that identification. You can simply go to the polling place. That you need to be registered there and go to the proper precinct. So don't just think, I'm registered in North Carolina, I'll go vote here in Elon. You'll have to go to the precinct you're assigned to, which again, TurboVote can help you check. And then you just go and cast your ballot. So it's been an interesting summer following the ongoing saga of North Carolina elections. And we've tried to, again, provide accurate information on that Elon Votes website as well as it's changed throughout the course of the last couple months.
Mm-hmm. And what are some of the ways that North Carolina's made it more difficult to vote?
So again, first, the voter ID law is a concern. There's been some movements about changing early voting dates. This is sort of nationwide. There's some movement to limit the number of early voting days or change precincts. And North Carolina's law was overturned because it very specifically tried to target minority populations. There was clear evidence of that, and that's why the court overturned it. So the North Carolina law in particular, there was an obvious sort of targeting issue there.
Mm-hmm. And I know the Fourth Circuit called it very openly discriminatory.
Yes,
and didn't hide its language in there, which is rare.
It was pretty blatant in its
that.
Attempts to discriminate against certain groups. So it's been overturned. And I mean, when I went to vote 2 years ago, they started warning me, you'll need an ID next time. But now you won't.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And I don't want to make you feel older, but I remember one of the more interesting parts in class. You showed us what the old ballots look like and how you would have to use I forget what it was, like a polling mechanism.
There are big levers.
Can you
yes.
just speak to how the voting itself on election day has evolved?
Well, so it varies state by state. So every state is different. When I first voted in Georgia, I used a big clunky machine where you flipped little levers. Now Georgia uses all touchscreen computer-generated systems. When I vote here in North Carolina, it's a Scantron system. It's very much like taking a test. You bubble in bubbles with a pen and then slide it in a Scantron machine. I'm not sure other areas of North Carolina may vote with a different type of ballot, but states get to do what they want. So it's one of the more fun discussions that I get to have with students is polling the class as to what forms of voting they've used before. But it's certainly evolved, right? We've outlawed things like the butterfly ballot and hanging chads that were a problem in 2000. Well, not outlawed, but they've gone away at this point because they were so hated and problematic. But so it's certainly evolved. You wouldn't have seen touchscreen ballots or touchscreen voting just 15, 20 years ago.
And as far as campaign strategy goes, this is kind of the main takeaway that I've gotten out of just kind of interning with the NNO and looking at the political landscape is that voter turnout generally is, if it's higher, it favors Democrats more. Is that a correct trend to make?
I think that's true, but I think this year is a wild card. Everything that we know about elections, Donald Trump has proven you can do the opposite and still be successful. So yes, that is largely true, but I wouldn't necessarily put money on that for this year.
So the larger question is, based on historical trends, does any of that matter in 2016? Everything that we know about politics, everything that we've read, all the historical data, does that mean anything?
Yes, it still does, certainly. So there's certainly still value to organization. That's what drives people to the polls and helps generate turnout, is having a really good organization. And the Trump campaign has just not put the same investment into building an organization. Instead, they've chosen to rely on state party organizations. Romney did the same thing, and they just weren't as successful with voter turnout efforts as the Obama campaign was. So I think that investment in infrastructure for a turnout mechanism will still have an impact. And there's some sort of theory out there that Trump has brought all these new voters to the fold. There is some research that shows these are not particularly new voters. What he did was bring general election voters, people who typically voted in the general election but didn't turn out in the primaries, turned out in the primaries to vote for Trump. So it may not be that he's sort of ignited a whole new coalition of voters that never voted before. He just got them to participate earlier in the process. Again, time will tell what happens on November 8th, if that is an accurate sort of summation of what's happened. But that's what seems to have happened.
And generally, people who participate in the primaries will participate in the general election.
Right. If you can get people to turn out in the primaries, then generally they're active enough that they're going to turn out again.
And final question was, we saw in 2008 with, actually no, I had two more questions, sorry.
Okay.
We saw in 2008 President Obama use social media a lot, and seemed that the Democratic campaign strategy was mobilize your existing support group
Absolutely.
to turn out in high numbers. What do you think the strategies are for Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump to secure a victory in North Carolina?
Well, so I mean, the strategy nationwide for the Clinton campaign is to mobilize the voters that voted for if you can get the Obama coalition to turn out and vote, everyone who voted for Obama to turn out and vote for Clinton, then you win, right? Now, Obama did not win North Carolina in 2012, so she certainly needs to get some more people on board. But using social media has become the norm at this point. Both candidates are very fluent in that. That being said, we as voters self-select and sort of hear the social media that we want to hear that reinforces what we already believe. But I think they'll use every trick they can to get people to turn out to vote. It's going to be really critical, particularly here in North Carolina, where it seems like it's going to be neck and neck and really close between the two candidates.
And one of the things that's just kind of frustrated me personally, and this is maybe just a journalism perspective, is even the questions I've been asking you have been so presidential election focused, when at the end of the day, the people who are going to have probably more of a direct impact in your everyday lives are going to be state, local representatives.
Absolutely.
And it just seems that there's a huge disconnect in public perception as to what the president does versus what your local officials can do.
It's so true. I mean, who wins the president is not going to your life is not going to be dramatically different on January 20-something, depending on whether Hillary Clinton is sworn in or Donald Trump. What could affect your day-to-day life is who wins your city council, right? So that's what I tell students who are not from swing states, right? You might think, well, I'm voting in a state that's solidly red or solidly blue. My vote doesn't matter. Well, yeah, your vote might not have a huge impact on the presidential election, but your vote still is very important in any number of races. It's one reason that turnout and voting and that responsibility is so important. Who serves on who's your sheriff can be really important and impact your life far more than who your president is. They're both important, but in sort of different ways to your day-to-day life.
And those were all of my main questions. Was there anything I didn't ask you particularly, maybe with voter registration, that's important to address?
I would just say, do your homework and make sure that if you're going to move your registration, you're careful about that. We want to just really make sure that students understand that. And we also want to make sure that students understand that outside groups coming onto campus, while they may have the best of intentions, they may not follow through with that, right? So you might fill out a sheet of paper to register to vote downtown, and they don't ever file that with the Board of Elections. The safest and best way to do that is to cut out the middleman and just use TurboVote. So when you hit send, it's going straight on to that Board of Elections office. We have a great relationship with the Alamance County Board of Elections. And that way you're sure that you didn't register to vote and then that form ended up in the trunk of someone's car and you show up on election day and you're not actually registered. So we just want to make sure that students get the best information and their intention to register gets followed through and they're able to vote on election day.